Okay, hello everyone. Today we have a very special guest, Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan, do you mind saying hi to the audience?
Hello, audience.
We have this opportunity because Jonathan has put out a very influential book, and now with the help of Cheers, it's available in Chinese as well. I'm holding the Chinese version of it. And the book is called Anxious Generation, and Chinese name 焦虑的一代. So Jonathan, I'll have a few words about who he is, and we'll have him speak with us. So Jonathan himself got his PhD in 1992 in psychology, and he's currently a social psychologist with NYU. Along his very long and productive academic career, he actually has been working on multiple facets, I would say, of issues related to social psychology. And his most recent work is this one on the impact of social media on the young generation, especially kids going through puberty, on the long-term impact on their mental health. And since the release of the book, it has been remaining on the bestseller list for weeks and has really promoted not only a lot of attention, but also real change on the ground, especially in the States. And since the book has been published in Chinese, a lot of readers of your book as well, Jonathan. So very happy to have this opportunity to have you speak to our audience directly around why you started doing this research, what's the major findings, and what are some things we can do, knowing what you've studied in this book.
hmm
All right, let's start with a motivation because frankly,
hmm
I actually read your Atlantic piece in 2021, I think, or 2020, 2021 on the why
Yes.
American became stupid.
Yes. Yep.
That was a fascinating piece. And I think you also mentioned in one of your talk, and that's sort of like you're not really intending to focus on social media for the youth. But
hmm
how did it become a research topic of yours from sort of a
hmm
decline in the political arena to
Yeah,
the mental health of young people?
certainly. Well, first, let me just say I'm very pleased to be talking with you. Cheers has published several of my last books. I visited China in 2015. I found it an absolutely fascinating country. And whatever's happening between our countries, we're all hurtling forward into this crazy technological world that is harming our children. And we've taken different approaches. The approach that we've taken in the US is generally to do nothing. Um, and so we're having some real problems, I would say. Now, as for your question, so my expertise is moral psychology. That's what I've studied since graduate school. And that brought me into studying cultural psychology. How does morality vary across cultures? And it brought me to studying political psychology. How does it vary between left and right? And why do people take part in political movements? I wasn't studying adolescent mental health. But what happened was everything seemed to go insane in the United States around 2014, 2015. And it clearly had something to do with social media. When we move our political conversations onto Twitter, onto social media, it was really bad. Democracy is a conversation, we say. And if the conversation is on Twitter, it's not a good conversation. So I was most interested in what social media is doing to our political system and to democracy. And that led to the article you mentioned, titled Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. It really started getting stupid in 2015, and it's getting stupider and stupider. And that wouldn't happen if we weren't all on social media, I believe. But the other thing that happened is since I'm a college professor at New York University, I noticed in 2014, 2015 that the students coming in were really different from anything we'd ever seen. They were very fragile, very anxious. Many of them went to the mental health center. They needed a lot of help with their their anxiety levels. And I've been trying to study that. What's causing that? And I wrote a whole book called The Coddling of the American Mind about how we overprotect our children. We don't let them grow up. We don't let them have experience. So that's part of the story, but I suspected that social media was also part. And in 2017, I didn't have the evidence to show that. So I just mentioned it in a couple of paragraphs and then moved on. Well, after that book came out in 2018, I got the evidence. There is now a lot of evidence that when young people use a lot of social media, It damages their development. It blocks out most experience. It makes them sleep less, exercise less, talk with their friends less. And it seems to contribute. We have evidence now that it contributes to anxiety, depression, and many other states. So that's how this book, The Anxious Generation, came about.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And then I think in the book, one of the major points you made, I think really struck with me deeply. And as you might know, because we started doing our own school, building our own school in 2016. And one of the fundamental beliefs is similar to what you said in the book, although we don't have all those data and the research you've done, is the loss of a play-based childhood. And then you actually made this
Mhm.
basic claim around the rewiring, the great rewiring of the childhood from a play-based to a phone-based. In China, that's I think slightly different. I would say it's more from a play-based to a academic, like strictly academic, a
Mhm.
test-based.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It's a loss of play.
Mhm.
And then you have, for our audience watching, you can get a copy of the book link below, but then you actually see, you actually devoted the entire chapter or entire section of 3 chapters talking about what
Mhm.
is play and why is it important. Can you say a few more things about that?
Mhm. Yes, that's right. This is half the story. The book is not really about social media. The book is really about childhood. And I start by pointing out that we are mammals. We are all mammals. And mammals, to be a mammal means that you have a long childhood and you literally take nutrition from the skin of your mother's chest. We have this long relationship. And that allows a lot of time for learning. But a lot of the learning happens in play. All young mammals play. They play a lot. And they play to practice skills that they will need as adults. And when we let children play, what do they play? They play tag, running around games, chasing games, hunting games, cooperation games. They learn so much in play. They learn more in play than anywhere else. Certainly, they learn more in play than they do in school in terms of how to grow up, how to get along with people. And at least in the United States, we all had a play-based childhood. There was a lot of crime in our cities in the 1970s and 1980s when I was growing up. But even still, everybody went out to play. Kids went out to play. And we began to get scared in the 1990s. We became afraid that our children would be kidnapped, which was never happening. We stopped trusting our neighbors, and we started keeping our children in. And in the 90s is also when computers were coming in, and then the internet. And so many of us thought, oh, well, my son is just on his computer all day long, or all night long. Well, that's good. Maybe he'll start a company. Maybe he'll get rich. Um, we didn't realize that children are not really safe on the internet, especially late at night when they're on alone late into the night. A lot of bad things happen. So, but the larger point is children need a great deal of play. In the West, or at least in the America and the English-speaking countries, we stopped letting them have outdoor play. We always wanted to supervise them. Now, I would like to say a word about what I saw in East Asia. In 2015, I took my family on a trip across China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. And what I noticed, it was especially clear in South Korea. It looked like there's no childhood. All they do is study for exams. And I understand this is the Confucian culture zone. You have, of course, the Gaokao in China. You have a long history of exams. And this is part of why East Asian students do so well in the United States. They're very good at studying, learning. They do very, very well in the American education system. But they're not allowed to have sleepovers. They're very limited in what play they can have. And so I think that's an open question. I don't want to criticize the way you're raising your children, but I can assure you that if you gave your kids a little bit more free play, they would be happier and probably more engaged in school. So I think neither of us are really doing it right. We're very different in how we raise our kids, but I don't. It doesn't look to me as though children are thriving in my country or in yours. What do you think? How do you think your children are
Exactly.
doing?
Exactly. No, I think, well, please do criticize because that's what I do all the time.
Okay.
It's the same thing. I'm actually right now I'm doing a visiting scholarship in Japan. I'm in Tokyo now. And then I actually wrote a piece criticizing Tokyo's education as well. So exactly. I think there are a lot of course, good intellectual tradition and everything.
Mhm.
But I think also similarly, I'm younger than you, but when I grew up, it's similar because back then there's first of all, of course, there's no internet, but also there's less sort of urban pressure. So I have a lot of
Hmm.
play. I had a lot of play when I was growing up. Like I remember I used to walk 40 minutes myself, from school to home, and that's very normal back then.
Hmm.
And now
Right. With other kids, talking and
yeah, with
laughing
other
and
kids,
joking. Yeah.
exactly. We have a walking team, and then,
Yeah.
that's it. I started doing that on starting the second grade. And then now it's
Wow.
like almost people think about it as impossible. Like, how is that
Right.
possible? Like, like the safety and maybe kidnapped and all that. And also there is back then I don't think people are just more deep in educational philosophy. It's just simply because there's less control and
Hmm.
less supervision. And as
Hmm.
you said, yes, there are downside too. There could be crimes and all that. But on the other hand, kids have a lot of room, not only room physically, but room mentally and psychologically
Yeah.
to grow up. And now I think that's in a way, of course, technology came. There's so much enabling things, but on the other
Hmm.
hand, if you look inside, it's very suffocating for the children.
That's
Yeah, so
right.
like even to the data you mentioned, I think Shanghai has scored very high on one of the PISA tests, comparable to Finland. But one of the data people often neglect is that kids in Shanghai studied twice as long as the kids in Finland,
Hmm.
to get to the same score. And you would
Yeah.
question, is it really necessary? Like, what are the exactly, what's being squeezed out is the playtime. But I think I will, because in the book you have so much depth. I really recommend people getting a copy of the book because our conversation won't be that long. But you mentioned a few things in play I think is so critical from an educator's point of view. One is that the real play has no, like, it's not a winning or losing game, right? So there
Hmm.
is, I think that's very critical. Like rather than, on the social media or on the or political debate, as you said, they're always pitting one against another. And you also mentioned the importance of play is the sense about synchrony, like singing
Hmm.
together, things like
Yeah.
that. I think you have pointed
Yeah.
out so beautifully. Can you elaborate a bit more
Hmm.
on those two or others too
Hmm.
in those
Yeah.
years?
Yeah. So boys and girls choose to play in different ways. This is not because of a sexist society. It's just what appeals to an 8-year-old girl is different from what appeals to an 8-year-old boy. So boys do tend to choose games where there's a winner, a winning team, and a losing team. Boys enjoy the competition more. It teaches cooperation. Boys enjoy team sports more. So when you let boys do what they want, they're going to do games like that. Now, then the video games come along, and what do? They stop doing physical games and they play video games all day long. Um, and this again blocks their physical and social and emotional development. Girls are very different. Girls are girls. There's a lot of research showing that girls use language not to compete, not to show off so much, but to try to connect, to try to strengthen relationships. And girls have a very elaborate mental map. Girls understand the social space more. They know who is fighting with who, who's friends with who. Boys are a little bit more oblivious to those things. So girls want to know that. And then when girls play, a lot of the play is, as you said, it's like there's no winner. It's jumping rope. Nobody wins jump rope. It's singing together. Girls like to sing together a lot. There's no winner. Girls in America, we call it patty cake. They do these, games with, the very fast hand motion. Do they do that in China also? Do girls do that? Yeah.
Something
So
similar.
nobody wins. Yeah, nobody wins. But by moving fast in synchrony, you actually get closer to another person. Your friendship will deepen. Also, sharing food makes people get closer. And so, the way you and I used to play as kids, we got very close with our friends. But once social media comes in, the key thing is really the portability. Once, when you were a child, when you were a teenager, you probably had maybe access to a computer, but it was a big computer on a desk. You couldn't take it with you. Once we get the smartphone, the iPhone originally, once we get smartphones and social media on the smartphones, that all happens between around 2012. 2010 to 2012 is when now a lot of teenagers have a smartphone. Now the girls have social information with them everywhere, every moment. And the phone is always calling out to them. Who said what about whom? Who posted a picture? And we have the terrible sight here, I'm sure you have it there, of a group of girls standing around. I guess they're friends, but they're each looking down at their own phone. And so even when our kids are together, they're just largely on their own phones. It's very, very sad. And my argument is that the reason that girls got so depressed, it's very sharp. When you look at the graphs of mental illness, there's no trend in the United States or the Western countries. There's no trend from the 1990s all the way through 2010 or 2011. There's nothing going on. Then all of a sudden, around 2012, 2013, the levels of anxiety and depression and self-harm, girls cut themselves, that all goes shooting up very, very fast after 2012, 2013. And my argument is once they're on social media, they're not connecting, they're lonely, they're not connecting closely with other girls. They are doing constant social comparison. They're seeing everyone else has a better life than me. And of course they get depressed and anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's as you said, for the girls and boys are different. And also that used to be in a way something they could develop in a more healthy way in play. I
Hmm.
remember you also said in the book that some of the things that play offers is, for example, you don't have rules, you make up rules, right?
Yeah.
And things you do, and then which like that's so true, and then that's actually quite important when you go to adulthood, and that's what you do. You make up rules, you
Yeah.
figure out the rope of the way, and get things done. And then somehow, as you said, when they move to a phone, everything become, I think you used the word performative, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because, teenagers are always very concerned about where they stand. When you're a child, you're not thinking about whether you're high status or low status when you're 6 or 7 years old. But by the time you're 12 or 13, certainly even by the time you're 10, I would say, people's bodies are changing. Some of the girls are very pretty, some are not so pretty. Some of the boys seem tough, some seem very frail. And the girls are developing their status hierarchy, and the boys are developing their status hierarchy, and everyone's very anxious about where they are in that. And I'm sure that was true when you were a child and when I was a child. But we didn't have a constant readout, a thing showing us the exact rankings and how if you do this, you rise a little bit. Oh, but if you do the other thing, you fall. I mean, what a terrible way to raise a child. It's no fun. And so social media, in fact, originally they were called social networking systems. Facebook, Friendster, MySpace, these were social networking systems. You network with people. But once you get the like button, the retweet button, the news feed, push notifications, now it's not about me connecting with you. It's about me making posts that I hope will go viral, and you're doing the same, and we're all doing the same, which means that we're all focused on just saying whatever it will take to get attention, and that's how
Yeah.
you win or lose, and that's not the right way to raise a human being.
Yeah. And I think that's also the point you mentioned in the Atlantic paper. I think that's really struck me as well, because I think I don't remember the exact words, but you're saying, in the normal society, it's like a bell curve. Most of the things that happen are in the middle, right? So it's kind of
Hmm.
boring stuff.
Yeah.
But that's kind of part of the institution building. That's how society is run. But when you get on social media, you want to be as extreme as possible because that's where you get more viewership. And that's
Hmm.
kind of the contributing to it. And I think the teenagers are especially vulnerable to that because it's
Hmm.
so important for, their part of identity, right?
Hmm. Well, that's right. So obviously, this is very, very bad for democracy because in a democracy, a healthy democracy has a sort of a center left and a center right that engage with each other but don't think the other is evil. And then
Mm.
you have a far left and a far right which thinks the other side is evil. But they're small usually. But with social media, the extremes become very aggressive and very powerful. They can destroy anyone. And so our democracy goes crazy, our politics goes crazy. And then children who are watching, they have their own influencers, but the boys are increasingly drawn to influencers who tell them a certain way of being a man. And the girls are increasingly drawn to celebrities who tell them they have to have a certain shaped body and their lips have to be this way, their skin has to be this way. In America, we have 10-year-old girls going into expensive makeup stores to buy beauty creams for their skin. These are 10-year-old girls with perfect skin. But the children, I mean, children are so, um, their their brains are hungry for stories and guidance and examples of how to be. And those examples used to always come from your elders, maybe your older siblings or your parents or your grandparents or your culture. Culture has always been transmitted vertically from one generation to the next. But once all the kids get on social media, and in America, they're on 5 hours a day average, 5 hours a day. There's not much time left in the day once you include school. Um, Suddenly, all the stuff coming in is not from your parents, not from your culture. It's from weirdos chosen by an algorithm.
Indeed, indeed. And I think in chapter 4 of the book, you actually said something exactly to this point. It's so interesting because on the one hand, as you mentioned, right? So like there are 10-year-olds showing up in like beauty stores, and as if they are, they're growing faster than us. Like we were like,
Hmm.
very lame compared to the 10-year-old now. But on the other hand, they have actually failed to transition to adulthood.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
right. So by the way, the fourth chapter of the book name is Puberty and the Blocked Transition to Adulthood. So you have almost this dichotomy, right? So you have to, on the one hand, all those 12, 13-year-olds behaving as adults,
Hmm.
like, as young ladies. On the other hand, that
Yeah,
transition has actually been blocked. Can you say more
that's right.
about that?
Yes, that's right. So sometimes people say, oh, kids grow up so fast these days. But that's not true. Kids are growing up so slowly these days because they don't have much life experience. You don't grow up just by getting biologically a year older. You grow up because you've had experiences, you've had challenges, you've had setbacks, and then from those you grow. But if you take all of those away and you just consume content from the time you're 7, our kids are getting on TikTok around 7 or 8. A lot of them are on TikTok. And so if you're just consuming content for your whole childhood, by the time you're 18, you've had the life experience of a 12-year-old from 30 years ago. You really haven't had any experience. And then some of the time, and then the generation that had so little experience, then they arrive at the university and they're not ready for it. They're growing up very, very slowly. Now, the other thing you add on top of this is that the girls are getting sexualized at an absurdly young age because many of the influencers are super sexy. They've had plastic surgery. They have large breasts. They have big lips. There's a certain look and a certain way of standing. And so to have 10-year-old girls exposed to this is sick. Um, so it's really, it's really bad for the girls. It's really bad for the boys. And so my argument is we should stop this. We should stop doing this. I have no interest in just making social media safer. Social media is wildly inappropriate for children. It's an adult activity. Talking to strangers on the internet, this cannot be made safe for children. So we need to see that social media in particular is an adult-only activity, and we need to block children from being on it. Now, TikTok might seem like it's entertaining, and of course, in China, you're able to regulate what is on your version of TikTok, so yours may not be as bad as ours. But the version that we get in America is horrible. It's degrading, it's stupefying. Um, and Americans are getting stupider since about 2018. We are literally getting stupider because we watch so much TikTok. And if you watch a lot of TikTok, you can't read books after that. You can't focus. It's hard to learn new things. So my argument is nobody should be watching TikTok ever. YouTube is different. YouTube, long stories are good. There's a lot of good things on YouTube. But the short format videos, the 5 or 10 second videos, these are really destructive to the human capacity to pay attention. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think just again, we don't have too much time with Jonathan, but in his book, we just more mentioned the mostly from the second part two of why play is important, and the entire part three is the great rewiring, like what has happened to
mhm,
get us to today, right? And then
yeah.
exactly as you said, because maybe with all social media, but you will say, can we modulate it? But I think you made a very convincing argument because that by design social media and algorithm is not, is not healthy for children. That's basically
Mhm.
by design. Just like cigarette is not, there's no way you can,
Yeah.
smoke cigarette as a in healthy way.
Hmm. Well, no, that's right, because cigarettes were designed to be addictive, or at least nicotine is intrinsically addictive. And the business model developed by Facebook, originally Facebook didn't make any money. They just connected people. But then they started showing advertisements and they used the algorithm to to hook each person with the best possible content to keep them on. So the major social media platforms, including TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat, these are designed to be addictive. Most of us adults, at least in the United States, there's now a growing awareness that it's not just the kids. We're all getting stupider.
Adults
We're
too,
all
yeah.
finding it. Yeah, there's just too much stuff coming in. I find it difficult to read a book because I'm always thinking, well, let me check the weather. Well, let me see how my book is doing on Amazon. Well, let me do this. there's just too many distractions. And so it's not as though our IQ is literally dropping, but we're behaving as if we were 10 IQ points stupider because we
Mm.
can't concentrate, we can't focus. Um, and this is especially frightening as AI is coming in so fast. So our machines are getting smarter and we're getting dumber. And I think we have to stop. We have to
Mhm.
stop. So in the book, I offer four new norms, four
Yep.
reasons, four norms that if we follow, we can break out of this crazy, horrible trap.
Yeah.
And they are no smartphone before 14, no social media before 16, phone-free schools. The phones should be locked up in the morning and given back in the end of the day, and far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Now, some of your listeners might be saying, oh, but if I don't give my daughter a phone until 14, she's going to cry and say she's left out. She's the only one. And that's true now. But what I'm proposing is that we're all stuck in this trap as individual families. But if we do it together, what if nobody gives or even if just half of the parents say, no, you're not getting a smartphone until you're 14. You can have a flip phone, you can have a basic phone to make phone calls. Sure, that way we can keep in touch. But you don't need the internet in your pocket until at least 14. And if half of us do that, well, then what's your daughter going to say? Mom, some of the kids have a smartphone and some don't. And then mom can say, yeah, and you're going to be in the group that doesn't because I love you and I want you to develop a brain that can pay attention to things.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, that's in the final part of the book. And I think I'm just like smiling when I see you listen to you say that because that's what I've been saying at the same time. And sometimes you don't even need half. You need one, just one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, no, it's best to have two or three because if you have three or four,
Right.
if you have three kids or four
Yeah.
kids who hang out together in the afternoons with no phones, they're going to have a lot of fun. They're
Oh,
going to be out there
absolutely.
playing. Whereas the other
Yeah.
kids, they're all just sitting there on their bed watching, consuming content.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Because I think sometimes we will think, oh, those trends are so big, I'm just the one individual. What can I do? I'm so
Mhm.
powerless. But I think that's what Jonathan's been promoting in his book or his talks as well. Is saying like, change actually happens from every individual, just like you and me, like whoever listening to
Mhm.
this. And if you decide there's one more parent or ideally two or three
Mhm.
around you, and basically your problem is solved, at least
Yeah.
80% of it, right? So I
Well,
think,
that's
yeah.
yeah, that's right. That's the trick is cooperation. The way to get out of a collective action problem is with collective action. And so actually I'll put out a plea to Chinese parents, and I'll go ahead and say to Chinese mothers, because what we've seen all over the world is it's really the mothers who are acting. The mothers they felt the kids being pulled away much more than the fathers did. The mothers see the damage from social media better than the fathers do. And so what's happened in the United States, there's a group called Wait Until Eighth. And it's the idea is to wait until eighth grade. Now that's the wrong number. It should be ninth grade. It should be high school. It should be a little older. But the point is, parents will sign a pledge saying that they will not give their child a phone until the end of eighth grade, which is around age 13 or 14. And then once I think 20 families have signed the pledge in that school, in that class, then the pledge goes live, everyone's notified, and now these 20 families all have each other. So it's a kind of social support. In Britain, they have a group called Smartphone Free Childhood, which has spread around to many other countries. In fact, there's no reason why there can't be a smartphone free childhood branch in China. So I would encourage, especially mothers who are concerned about this, just search for smartphone free childhood. .co.uk because it's a British site, but and see if you like what you see there. Start a branch in China. I'm sure you'll find a lot of other families will come to you and want to work with you. They all sign a pledge, and then your kids are going to have a much better childhood.
Yeah, thank you. I think I know for my audience, you probably think, oh, that's very difficult. With the reality is, their schools actually sometimes require you using certain apps and all that. But I think just to add to what Jonathan is saying, it doesn't have to be, sort of the pre-tertiary and all that. And I think what's in the book, that's why, first I'll read the book because the book it didn't say the phone is bad, right? If you use the phone to
Hmm.
check map, fine,
Yeah.
right? So because we do use the phone actually does provide functions.
Hmm.
My
Yeah.
kids, actually, because they are living in Japan now, they do need a phone because they need a phone
Hmm.
to go through the subway. They can go to school themselves. But I think what Jonathan is advocating is that social media is really bad.
Yeah,
And
really
also,
bad.
especially those short little videos, like in whatever app platform you have. But long content is actually okay, educational. So I think if you can really smart control the phone and at least form a group of phone
Hmm.
smart parents, how do I
Yeah,
call it?
good. Oh, there you
Right?
go. Phone smart parents. That sounds good. You can, that's what it can be called in China. Yeah. And actually,
That
let me expand on what you just said about stories versus short. That's a very important point. What I'm coming to see is that we shouldn't be talking just about screen time because screens are very different. What I'd like to share, I think this is, I hope this will be a very helpful piece of advice, especially to parents of younger children. There's two extremes. On one extreme is story time. Story time is good because humans are a storytelling animal. So humans have always told stories. We've always raised our kids with stories. We want our kids to read books, novels, get all kinds of patterns of experience from writing. Story time is good. So if your kid is going to watch a movie, which is like 80 or 90 minutes long, with another person, maybe with a sister or brother, maybe with a friend, maybe with you, but if you're sitting together, not alone, watching on TV, not a touchscreen, a story about people moving through a moral world where there's good and there's bad and there are rules and there's conflicts. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. The worst thing is what we call iPad time or tablet time or iPhone time, where you just hand the kid the device, I'm busy, you're crying, here, take my phone, shut up. And it works. The kid shuts up. But what they're doing is this is what we should call fragmenting time. It breaks apart your concentration. They're not watching a long story. It mostly ends with the short videos. They're going to find YouTube Shorts or TikTok, um, or they're going to move around from one app to another, and they're doing it alone. So that's fragmenting time. So your children should have no fragmenting time, certainly not before age 14. But don't worry about story time. I mean, they shouldn't be watching 3 hours of movies a day. But if they want to watch a couple of movies a week, but when they're 5, 6, 7, or older, then I think that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So again, do get a copy of the book. The book not only have all the scientific research, the data supporting all of the conclusions that Jonathan put out in the book. Also, it has very practical suggestions of what we can do. And also, I really love it, like the decades of work you did before this, when you talk
Thank
about
you.
moral psychology, democracy, political dysfunction. One thing I think it's why your body of work is so powerful is that it's all connected. It's not we're
Yeah.
just talking about now phone with kids, teenage psychology and mental health, but it's actually connected to how we're doing as a society, as a human being,
Yeah.
right?
Not well. Yeah.
Not well. Because I also want to mention I'm a big fan of your other book, the Coddling of American Mind. It translates actually also in China available called 浇灌的心灵. And I think also, although you're not studying in China, your most of your research is based on the English speaking world, but there's a
Mm,
lot of similarity there as well in
mm,
terms of how we as adults, in a way, have been behaving. I think we're acting oftentimes out of fear. And then when
mhm.
you're acting out of fear, you become overprotective. And then when you're
Yes,
overprotective,
that's right.
right, you basically create a world that's actually more fearful.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. That's what's happening to us.
Right, right. So again, Cheers has introduced all your books to China. So like if you get a copy, not only with this one, but if you read Jonathan's earlier book, you will actually see the connection. I think that's why it's very powerful for us not only to read as a parent raising children, but also actually for ourselves in reflecting, our choices every day. What does it do,
Mm,
not only to the children, but also to ourselves, to the society at large. So again, thank you
mhm.
for such a, vast body of work that
Oh,
provides
my
wisdom.
pleasure. So I'll especially mention my first book, The Happiness Hypothesis, was about ancient wisdom, and I
Mhm.
quote some Chinese sages in there.
Yeah,
The ancients in China and India and the Mediterranean world, they all came to many of the same insights. So that's what my
yeah,
first book is about. And my second
yeah,
book,
yeah,
The Righteous Mind, is about moral and political psychology. And even though I wrote it from the point of view of sort of Western or American democracy, it helps you understand everything about politics and internal conflicts. So I hope that will be of interest in China as well. And I'd just like to mention one other resource. I don't know what percentage of your listeners are able to read English, but our website, if you go to anxiousgeneration.com, we have a lot of material, a lot of resources for parents, for teachers. So that's the central hub for information, anxiousgeneration.com.
Hmm. Yeah, I think many of them can read it. And then if not, now with, well, that's the benefit of AI. They can translate it.
That's true. They can translate anything. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Jonathan. Again, you can find links to the to this current book and also to earlier books of Jonathan's work that's been translated to Chinese at the screen below. And I think the conclusion of this book, you said bring childhood back to earth.
Yeah.
I think we with that we'll bring everything. Hopefully, we can bring many things back to earth.
Mhm. Good. And
Um,
I hope you'll let your children out to play a little bit more in China.
Please do. Exactly. No, exactly. We're depriving them of a childhood they deserve, which is abusing the basic rights of
Mhm.
children. Yeah. So let's again, thank you so much, Jonathan, for your time and then for putting out this excellent work and all the inspiration and a solution. And well, I guess we'll just draw wisdom from it and then change bit by bit.
I hope so. Thanks so much, for bringing my ideas to a Chinese audience. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.